It's a matter of great privilege and honor to be in discussion with somebody as distinguished as Dr. Balasubramaniam, or Balu sir, as we call him. Sir, your book provides, it's a first of its kind book. It provides a conceptual framework. It provides a means to cognize Indian leadership from within. Ano bhadraha kratavo yantu vishwataha. It is a quote from the Rig Veda, which many of us know. Modi ji himself has actually quoted this on several occasions in various speeches. While most of us wax romantic about this being open to new ideas from all directions, from all quarters, there seems to be, the truth of the matter is that there seems to be great hesitation in even considering the Indic perspective. While we are very welcoming of other ideas from the West, as Dr. Vikram Sampath said, there seems to be a great deal of hesitation in actually looking within and in acknowledging the Indic perspective or the Indian perspectives. So, and this is exemplified, as you may know, it's exemplified by the fact that there are very few students who are studying management studies, who are studying leadership theories, who are part of leadership conclaves across the world, who study Indian perspectives from a global vantage point even. So, given this context, how do you locate your book? And what void, intellectual and otherwise, what void did you look to serve?
I think it's a very long question. I'm going to answer a substantial part of it. The appreciation of leadership generally revolves around the very limited appreciation of a leader. And we sort of personify it and start looking at traits, behaviors, and the person becomes more important to the fact where the West says, without followers, there's no leader. So the identity of a leader comes from not from himself or within himself, but from around him. And my own understanding, living close to 26 years with the indigenous tribal community, seeing chieftains in action, interacting with them, they didn't go to any Harvard, and they had such extraordinary lessons to teach me. And I never realized that I was learning lessons from them. That's the beauty of learning. You don't realize it until it's later. And I thought I didn't know enough, and this urgency to know took me to places, to courses, to universities, landed at Kennedy School. Thought that my concern was, it all began with my disgust at the way the state treats its citizens. And trying to sue the state, getting beaten up, arrested, all that happens to all this kind of activism that we do. I was confused that poverty was being created by the state, and then you had poverty elevation program. So what kind of a policy maker is he? Then I realized that it is not the policy that is flawed. Policy is flawed because the policy maker doesn't understand people. And he doesn't understand people because he doesn't exercise the leadership, which is all about understanding and connecting to people. So I thought maybe the West knows it better. That led me to Kennedy School, a couple of fellowships in leadership, started teaching it. The last 15 years I've been teaching leadership at Cornell, and I realized that they appreciate being a leader. But whereas India celebrates the exercise of leadership, and there's a hugely distinct paradigm. For us, Krishna is not God because of the life he leads. Then he can't be God. You can't be marrying so many wives and running around and having fun. And you won't call him God if you take him as a leader. But the acts that he did, the exercise of leadership that Krishna did, including giving us the Bhagavad Gita, is what we celebrate. So I started asking myself, does Indic wisdom really capture all this? And we live in a very strange time. The moment you say Indic, you're either discarded out saying that you are a product of some fossilized past, right, and you don't have evidence, you don't talk about it. Nobody has a patience to be objective today. Everybody loves being subjective because that's what you can write on social media. And I started understanding that we are two versions. We live in a world where the two versions. One is a romanticized version. Everything Indian is great. There's a lot of trash also in our past. And Vivekananda said it, throw it out of the window, he said. But there's a lot of good. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I thought, let me present it evidentially. So the journey started 12, 13 years ago. Luckily, I had, at that time, my guru and guide and mentor, Swami Sureshanji, was alive, and I used to interact with him, discuss with him. And I used to explain this and try to tell him the distinctions. And in his own humorous way, he said, "Naan sadhukana ella bittbittidini, ಹೊಸ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀನಿ." So ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡ, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ. Then in the course of the conversation, he said, "I don't know whether any one man can embody all that you're talking to me about. But there's a young person who came to Rajkot long time ago to the ashram to become a monk. Luckily, he didn't become a monk. We discouraged him, and he's now chief minister of the state. Why don't you start studying his life and see whether there are any patterns you can spot?" I thought, I have no access. Why waste time on all that? So that's how my previous book, Leadership Lessons for Daily Living, where I tried to use these principles and filter people, the ordinary people whom we discuss as ordinary. I've written about street vendors, about auto drivers in that book, who manifest extraordinary leadership, the way Indic wisdom describes it. And I thought my job is done. Little would I imagine that 3 years ago I would be appointed by him to be the member HR of the Capacity Building Commission, which is one of his, he sees as his legacy, the Mission Karma Yogi he calls it, where we are looking at how do you convert civil servants, possibly the biggest challenge of my life. Living in the forest was very easy. Living in a forest called Delhi, it's an art by itself, art and a science by itself. I'm figuring it out.
People who have lived in Mysore and Bengaluru.
And ಮೈಸೂರಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದವ್ರಿಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗೋದೇ ಕಷ್ಟ. ನಾನು ಮೈಸೂರಿನ ಕಾಡಲ್ಲಿದ್ದವನು. ಆ ಕಾಡಿಂದ ಮೈಸೂರಿಗೆ ಬರೋದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತಿದ್ದೆ. But the point is, I realize that we have so much, and if you don't take a person living in flesh and blood today, ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಭಾಳ ಸುಲಭ, ವಿವೇಕಾನಂದ ಥರ ಇರಬೇಕು, ಅರಬಿಂದೋ ಥರ ಇರಬೇಕು. ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಆಲ್ ಟಾಕ್ ಎಲಕ್ವೆಂಟ್ಲಿ, ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ನ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. The best way to follow all these great people are put them on a pedestal, worship them, celebrate a Jayanti, and then your job is done. And I thought I will not get into the trap in this book. Let me look for a real life case study in Exemplar. See whether whatever he fits into what I'm discovering, and if he permits me, then write about it. And I have the vantage point of sitting very high on the perch, watching him in action,
Yes.
interacting with him, able to talk to him one-to-one and clarify. And the fun of one-to-one conversation is very different. I can write a separate book on that. But the point I'm trying to say is I realize there's so much we can teach the world. And now India is in a transition. Finally, we're able to shirk off this negativism. Now, Vivekananda says, he told this 100 years ago, you give an Indian child a high school education, the first thing he'll learn is my parents are idiots, my country is stupid, this is a dirty place, all that. Yeah. But 100 years later, at least now there's a newfound resurgence, where we are re-looking at seriously at things Bharatiya. We are asking ourselves difficult questions. And then Indic wisdom is not just scriptural wisdom. There's another misconception. We have the footprint of Indian thinking is everywhere: science, metallurgy, mathematics, governance, public administration, agriculture, jurisprudence. You think of it, there is. None of us have gone deep enough. Like people like Vikram are, the journeys are all only now putting it all out for us in a language we can all appreciate. But there's a lot of folk literature. There's a lot of, I found a lot from Jataka tales, Panchatantra, Subhashitas, and Mahabharata and Ramayana. You look at them as stories, which very powerful leadership messages. Possibly I can keep talking and writing more books. So it's a difficult challenge. One of my academic friends said, it's 20 books rolled into one. Each chapter can be 2-3 PhDs, which it is. It's 10-12 years of research in the Indic space, 2 years of research into PM's 50 years of his public life. I had a team of 6-7 researchers full time. It was a hard time. I used to start writing at 3 in the morning. I must have rewritten this book 30-35 times. Because when you're writing of a personality with 78% popularity rating, who's loved as much as hated,
Yes.
and anybody writing about him is seen as a critic or as a bhakt, and you live in a difficult time. And I had to be extremely conscious that my intellectual integrity is not at stake. And I also report to him, when you're so close, when the moth is close to the flame, it can get burnt. So I have to make sure that I don't get drowned in his charisma, which is very high, because I can narrate a lot of personal incidents where I would love to work for that man, but people don't know that outside. At the same time, I can't let that cloud my judgment and my research. Yeah. So there's a lot I said, and like Vikram said it so beautifully, the famous saying that you judge a book not by its cover. I think I want people to read it inside. And I've tried to articulate and package because the Prime Minister is very clear. He said, if you're writing this, it has to be for a global audience. We have to proudly take Indian leadership to the world. So if this becomes a textbook around the world, then I think your book is worth it. He said, he had a nice way of saying it, मैं आपकी तरह हार्वर्ड नहीं गया हूँ, MBA नहीं किया हूँ, लेकिन मुझे जो मालूम है गीता उपनिषद से. So whatever you say only can come from that. I don't know what else I know. So if you discover anything else, tell me, he said. And so it is the academic book. I put my research notes into it.
Yeah.
It's a practitioner toolkit. Suhail Seth called me suddenly one day from London and said, I just got a copy of your book. I didn't want to forget telling you this. Don't call it a book anymore, he said. He said it's a misnomer. It's a do-it-yourself kit. The finest kit I have got. Youngsters of this country should get it. So it is practitioner, it's academic. It can be broken down into leadership workshops.
Right. I mean, in this juxtaposition of Western and Indic perspectives, you've had to develop your own unique methodology to actually describe this model. As they say in art, the choices that a painter makes speak loud, but the choices that a painter does not make, or the strokes that he does not choose to take on the canvas, speak more eloquently. So, and Narendra Modi ji antaha ಒಂದು complex ವಸ್ತುವನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ನೀವು ಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನು ಬರೆದಿದ್ದೀರಾ. So in that brave journey, as written in the title of today's discussion, braving to write this book, in that journey, what were the challenges? What were the internal conflicts? Especially, and how did you sieve through the narrative wars, the agenda wars, the information warfare that's out there, both in social media, and how did you have to reconcile with your own personal reflections?
See, I was very clear in my mind. Do I need to write this? Am I just pandering my personal ego in writing the book? And so I started off with that question. And then I realized if Indic wisdom has to spread, there's a story to be told. And if I can tell it through a lived example, one narrative is a tea seller rising up to the Prime Minister. We so casually throw it away, right? It looks so simple. A very privileged guy with a silver spoon in this country is yet to be the Prime Minister. So, other way of looking at it, right? So we got to understand it's hard work. It's not easy. It's very difficult to get to where we are. And I have seen my own journey. I realized that I was the same even before I went to Harvard. I possibly used to write so much on human development and criticize government even before I went to Harvard. Suddenly, going to Harvard gives me the cosmetic credibility. It's a strange world we live in. That's a reality. I don't deny anything. But the barriers to entry in a space like politics, in a country like India, is real. If somebody could climb that ladder with one thing which is common, when I did the research, the day I felt I should write this story was, from his 17th year, I have a research note. In fact, I joked with him once and said, I possibly am the only one who knows 50 years of your life now. Right? And I have such material. 17 to 19 is a gap. And the arrangement between me and him is, if I discover something, I will not speak about it. So I have not said anything here except saying that he walked around the country. Now that is where his connectedness happens. And in this book, I write about darshana. Darshana is not the Devasthan Darshanagalalla. That's an external manifestation of Devasthanagalu. But the opportunity to reflect and go inside yourself is what he did for the next 2 years. Monasteries, ashrams, Ramakrishna Mission. I got dates and validation like that. The Belur Mutt, Advaita Ashram in Mayavati. And the time he spent just in personal reflection possibly is the foundation. Now, without understanding that, you can't understand leadership. But that's a gap in my book, because that's something which he said is my life, my own, leave it out. And I left it out, except for mentioning it. But then, what is common is there's a crucible moment in his life when you're 7 or 8 years old. I write about it in the book.
Yes.
As a child. All of us go through crucible moments, but we don't think about it. Most of us have so many other moments which makes the older moments memories, and we can hold on to the next moment and think that's the purpose of life. Very rarely have I seen a global leader who's actually held on to one single purpose that came from that crucible moment, the purpose to serve humanity. The manifestations might be different. It might be a pracharak, it might be the organizing secretary of his party, it might be chief minister, prime minister. But that is not altered. And try holding on to a thought for 5 days, honestly speaking, any of us. and ask somebody to hold on to a thought, that single-minded pursuit, and being completely insulated by the noise outside. I thought, if this man can do it, I can do it for 2 years. So I tried to keep all the noise outside. It's difficult. I was not on social media. Only now my team believes that when you're surrounded by an average age of 23, 24 around you in your office, they believe you're fossilized if you don't have a Twitter account, if you don't have an Instagram account. And so they put me all there, and now they're doing a damn good job of it, is what I'm told. So they're repackaging me in an avatar which I didn't know I existed in. But it is keeping yourself insulated from that. What I admired from him was his equipoise, his sthita pragnate. No, when I could watch from close quarters the entire farm laws journey, I have seen, spoken to I mentioned it, the defense minister and the home minister when the Balalkot strikes happened, and what emotions goes through somebody when you actually send a plane to shoot and fire. It's easy for us in the newspaper to say our fighter jets went and bombed up the other place and came. But can you take responsibility for lives? It could be your own people, it could be their own people, it's people. And how do you relate to it? Right. It's very easy for us to read a Frederick Forsyth novel, but when you're actually the decision maker, no, it's not easy. Jirle odadangalla. It's a difference. So when I started seeing all that, I thought this is a story to be told. This is the version that the world to understand. One, the possibility of leadership. That even I can do it. I can awaken the inner leader in me. And my last point is my literature review of the Western world. There's a very popular book called The Myth of a Strong Leader. You know, this narrative, 56-inch chest and all that is going around. I said, okay, what does it mean to be a strong leader? So Archie Brown, a very well-researched book, but unfortunately, again, very Western-lensed, is analyzed 5 leaders, including a Russian leader. And he says it's a myth, you can never have a strong leader. I was wondering, what is the language? And then I realized the West measures strength from an external demonstration of strength. If I can beat you up and have power over you, then I'm powerful. Whereas we don't even have that yardstick. India measured strength from the power within. It was never the power without. And Vivekananda gives it to the mission, but it's a very strong statement. It inspires the Prime Minister. It's Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitayacha. A civilization which says I have to evolve and understand and recognize my inner self, but that is useless if in the process of discovering my inner self, I'm not useful to the world outside. Which civilization in the world can say this with pride, that we consider humanity as important as your inner humaneness? I thought this man is living it, and I have to tell this story and bring out the power within for the world to understand, and not just celebrate power without.
Wonderful. Yes, that nicely segues into the next question, and to just sort of reiterate what you just said, many of us stumble upon these quiescent inner truths, and most of us walk away from it. And that's the only separator between mere mortal and greatness, isn't it? So you right away you get into the idea of who is a leader and what does leadership look like in the real world. And then you make this statement, profound statement, right in the first few chapters, that the West looks at leadership as a trait-based, static state of being, whereas the Indic perspective looks at the leader as a kartru, as somebody who's able to exercise action, which is in touch with the ground realities at any given point in time. So this kartru versus bhartru, the bearer of certain traits, how did you sort of arrive upon that very primordial distinction between how we look at leaders versus the West?
If you look at all the leadership theories of the West, they evolve with the professor who writes about it, right? Every school, and being an academic myself, I know that if I'm writing something, I want to leave my footprint. That academic ego is there, right? I want to leave behind something which I think is mine until you come along and say, mine is better. That's how knowledge also grows. So I found there's nothing like universal truth in leadership. We have situational theory, did history make the man, did man make history, all this conversation. Are you born with it? Does leadership, can you acquire it in your real life? All these kind of stories. And on the other side, we have Punarjanma and in one completely different narrative in India. And how do you reconcile this? Could I have acquired traits over several janmas that manifest today as we can argue both sides. So to me, the challenge was, I have not disproved anything. Let me make a clear confession. I am not saying the West is wrong. I have no such false ideas. I am not celebrating saying India is great. It's the only thing that is great. India is great, but we are not the only great civilization. There's a lot to learn from every civilization. Everything is in context, so I try to bring it out. Leadership is always in context. But what I discovered strangely is most of the leadership tenets that is described in our civilization, with thousands of years of descriptions, are all sort of standardized paradigms. But giving the space for different ways that it can manifest in. It's something like the swimming pool is the same, the swimmer is the same, but the way you can swim is 100 different ways. It's like what Krishna says, as many people, so many paths. But I realize God is one, and the ability to recognize God is possibly only one. But the way to get there is several. And that's what I found the way Indic leadership comes out. It is actually not at all dogmatic. We could experiment, and it's a very powerful thing. And in the political space, if I were to draw a parallel, today in the policy world, we talk of short-termism and long-termism when we do policies. Most electoral democracies, by definition, are short-term. You cannot help but win the next election. There is nothing seeking beyond 4 years, 5 years, depending on the country you are in. We say Shreyas and Preyas in a different way. But India is possibly the only country today in this moment of time which talks of a 25-year window, which talks of Amrit Kal, which talks of what will be in 2047. Man may not even be Prime Minister, may not even be alive in 2047. But the vision to say, looking like that is not the great thing. What I realize is as good as that, as good as giving free homes and free rice and something else. So I was wondering, it is not about Shreyas and Preyas, but this perfection in finding the right balance between this, the equilibrium point. That is what Indic wisdom is all about. It is always about moderation. Even the Gita talks of moderation. It doesn't talk of extremes. So that is something, if you can apply it in everyday life, whether it's your alcohol in the evening or the food that you eat, it's just moderation in everything. And I thought in leadership, that kind of fascinating thread that runs through was very unique. And the West has we are also imitating it today. That's why we celebrate and stand along the road if our cricketers come back. Winning it is important for us, I do agree. Yes. But there's so many other things, so many other smaller victories in this country which we don't even notice. True. Right? But the point I'm trying to make is we might imitate the West in all that. Then I thought, how do we package this in such a way that if I don't say you're wrong, but if I say that you may not be adequate, it's for the reader to discern it. I bring out the inadequacy of the Western concepts of leadership, which are applied in particular context. I bring out Huntington's essay, Clash of Civilizations, and say where he himself says the answers are going to come from the East, and I say that is what it's coming from India. I bring in the concept of Vishwaguru not as a romanticized slogan, but explaining in my last chapter the Dharma of Legacy and Legacy of Dharma, where the Purusharthas are possibly the best way to make sure the Delhi Declaration happens in real life, the 4 Ps. So I've explained and deconstructed it. So I have actually given a framework. How much of it we choose is each person's choice. And I've deliberately chosen 3 leaders who I was very inspired by. Abraham Lincoln, Lee Kuan Yew, and Deng Xiaoping. Each operated in a different context. Each lived in a different era, but all of them shifted the narratives of their countries. But if those 3 were to live in the same countries today, it will be a disaster. Right? Try living in a world of social media.
Right.
So I have said Modi is one person who can manage his social media so beautifully well, at the same time remain unaffected by what you troll there.
Right. As typical TP Kailasam used to say, Ella Satyagalu is dependent on Desha, Kala and Vartamana.
Beautiful.
Right? So, yes, I'd like to, with your permission, in your book, Artful Mastery, there's this very wonderful quote by Robert T. Oliver. In the Western world, rhetoric deals with the assumption that the speaker seeks to manipulate a change in the reactions of his listeners. His aim is, however gently, to coerce an agreement from them. And in contrast to this, you draw upon the Sadharanikarana and Sahridaya Bhava models from the Natya Shastra. And you locate Modi ji's several models of communication, for example, the Man Ki Baat. And you locate that in the Natya Shastra's Rasa theory. How many of us actually read the Rasa theory or understand Rasa, Dhvani, Auchitya and Vakrokti in the context of communication theories in leadership today? So I felt that that was such a significant piece of your original contributions to the world of leadership theory. Can you please talk more about that in detail?
Yeah, I think the fascinating part for me was one of my classmates at Harvard, she teaches at Kennedy School, and she teaches a communication class, and we are very close friends. And so, in the course of a conversation, I was talking to her, and I realized that what she was describing as ultimate in communication leadership was inadequate to describe Prime Minister.
Right.
So I said, then if what she's teaching is not good enough, is PM's communication bad, or is her teaching bad? I couldn't discover it. Something is inadequate, right? If your theory is not explaining the practice, the theory is inadequate. Or if the practice is not, it's much below the theory that's getting explained, then you have to elevate your practice. So I got deep into it and said, this man has learned no communication theories. He's not been trained anywhere. One of the former American presidents, when he was governor of his state, I took a course on politics long ago, and we would analyze leaders. This man's communication was so dreadful that we were wondering how the hell did he get elected as the governor of his state. He spent $10,000 an hour, I'm talking of 30, 40 years ago, you can guess which the man I'm talking about, to learn how to communicate, and he becomes the president. Today his communication is world class. So it's a trainable commodity, but trained for what? Trained for just selling my message to you. Not to engage you in my message, but to get you to be enamored and fall in line with my message. That is manipulation.
Yes.
So that's when I started getting deep into it. And I asked, how does PM communicate? And what does he do? With us, with anybody? So I started observing, and the private space to observe was there for me. I realized something which was very strong. And one of my, I think Ramesh is here, one of my colleagues at VLead had written a small blog article, which kick-started the thinking actually on Sadharanikaran. And I said, wow, this seems a better explanation, so let me go deep into this. So I went deep into it, and I realized, what does PM do? Whether it's the way he dresses, whether the way he talks, whether the way, and what has he done for 50 years as a pracharak onwards, is to build a deep connect with people. That is why he can, without a second thought, hug a Trudeau. Trudeau is embarrassed because he's been criticizing us so much, he's nervous. Because his communication is a different style. It is to communicate, to manipulate. It's a post-Second World War emergence, right, the narratives. But for us, it's ancient and civilizational. So what we do is, what Bharata in the Natya Shastra says, Bharata Muni says is, he describes exactly the way a Western lens describes it today, but he says something much deeper. He says the decoding and encoding is not for the message. It is loaded with the emotion. Right? So reframing the understanding, whether it's a dance or an art form, you watch a Bharatanatyam dance and you can feel the pain on her face. You're just sitting there somewhere, your neurons are mirroring what she's feeling. How can that power come? It is the bhava, right? And then he does that. When he's talking to a government beneficiary, even if it's virtual, he can relate. When he's talking on Man Ki Baat, the way he brings in things. When he's giving a speech, and half the time all the speech writers worry because 80% is extempore. He just gets off. Right? And so how does he do it? And then I realized that it's very easy. Bharata describes it as, unless my heart and your heart unite, in the space of Saharidayata, only then Sahakaryata can emerge. Collective action. Now that is so powerfully described, then I thought, I don't know, I also mentioned this, Otto Schwammer in MIT, a good friend, his research is on, he runs an institute called Science, Service and Spirituality. What India talks about, he's made an institute out of it. He talks of what is called Theory U and the 4 stages of listening, and he describes co-generative listening. That is the ultimate description Bharata gives, the Advaitic space of oneness. From that Ekatvam, what emerges, he says. And that's exactly what PM does so well. That's why he can connect at such a deep level.
Absolutely. And as you have most importantly emphasized in the book, the Natya Shastra model basically collapses the binary between the communicator and the person receiving the communication.
It unifies them.
And unifies them and brings them on to a common ground of bhava to bhava, heart to heart, and being a sahridaya. So, last but not the least, I'm told that we're running out of time, and before we open the floor to questions, I'm sure you're going to be bombarded with many questions. I wanted to ask you, Pustakadallirodanna definitely people will read. Is there any vignette, any personal memory, any recollection that you would want in the process of writing the book and collecting information for it that you would like to share with our audience today?
There are several. Some of them are personal, so I don't want to put it out in the public space, and I don't want it to be misunderstood as I seek something from him or he's going to get a few votes more. I don't want to get into that space. But there's several experiences that I had during those one-to-one sessions, which is a book by itself. There's several anecdotes described to me which I have not put in the book because it may not have been in the context of leadership. The flow it goes in a particular way. I structured it in a particular way. But one thing that really touched me was in a casual conversation he was saying, and I've not written it in the book. I won't talk about the other incidents which are deeply personal. It's mine and his alone. But I'll talk about this, which he said as an anecdote. He had gone to Chennai for convocation, I think Anna University. It's one of the largest universities in India. And he said, a lot of universities invite me, I go, and they are very happy the Prime Minister is coming for a convocation address. But I have a secret which I have not told anybody. 2 anecdotes I'll tell and then stop there. And then he went in a room like this. So obviously SPG is SPG. And they would make sure that only a certain amount of people can be there and they have to maintain a certain amount of distance. And so students, I think 17, 18 students graduating, only maybe a few hundreds were there, thousands were there. So PM was concerned. He said, this is the largest university in the country and this is Chennai.
Right.
And he said, I don't know where the other students are. And he asked the Vice Chancellor. Vice Chancellor told him that they're all in other rooms, televisions have been fixed, etc. And this is where the Sahradiyata comes. The bhava cannot be transmitted completely through a television, right? So he never disturbed, he's so sensitive. He never disturbed the Vice Chancellor. He waited till the event was over, and he does this to everybody. Walked away. And then went into these rooms. The event was done. It always sends his SPG into a tizzy. Went into those rooms, simply had nothing, no arrangements there, right? He inverted a chair, stood on it, started talking to all the young people, and he had fun. It was never reported in the media, nothing. And he came back and told me, I said, how does it feel? He said, if the media reported it, they'll say he's a politician. He has to get votes in Chennai. He's not very popular in Chennai. So he said, anyway, they'll not vote for me, I know. So why will I do it? But he said something very deep. He said, people misunderstand that I am doing it for a show. But what they don't understand is I'm 73 years old. And everybody says, where does your energy come from? He said, that is where my energy comes from. Going, just meeting to them, talking to them, feeling one amongst the young people, drawing inspiration from there. That's why he said he meets the gaming people, he meets the 22-year-old social influencers. He says, that is where the ideas come from, that is where I can feel, because now I'm so old, I'm disconnected. To stay connected, I must do all this. I think that's very powerful, and I know I've run out of time, but it'll take a minute more. I've written that incident, but I explained the explanation he gave me to me, the incident. He narrated this anecdote at Infosys, I think, when he was meeting all the techies, about a taxi driver, and he said casually, how many of you actually involved in a conversation with your taxi driver?
Right.
Then I came back, I asked him, how is it so important? He said, importance is not talking to the taxi driver. That is just not, hota hai. Possible, everybody talks. He said, the importance is after you get down, pay the fare, and as he's about to go off, stop, talk to him about his family and all that. He said, the real love you can give is show that you're investing your precious time on him after the journey. During the journey, it's no sharing of time. The time that you're giving him after the journey is recognition of him as an individual. That is the lesson I learned, he said. And I thought that is very powerful.
That's right.
Since we don't have so much of time, we'll just take up 2 questions right now, and the rest can be.
And I can be outside.
Authors, yeah, right.
Offline.
Sir, being an economist, I believe that by 2030 we will be $5 trillion economy. total leadership. But when we see the point from the view of Amartya Sen, where the argumentative Indian, whether we have this democratic leadership because when a leader thinks that people should follow him, or when the leader thinks that whatever he wants, that people should do that, whether that leadership is possible. Second point is about Arrow's theory.
Okay, I'll just answer this. I'll forget your question then.
Yeah.
Also, in the interest of time, please keep your questions brief.
See, I think we all have our narratives. I don't disagree. Amartya Sen is too senior and too big, and I read his books a lot. Development is Freedom, where he talks of capabilities. My view is very simple. Why do you think he's asking you to follow him? He's asking you to keep this country clean. He's asking you to pick up the piece of paper, throw it into a dustbin. He's asking you to be Indian. Right? And if you think it is asking you to imitate him, that's your problem, not his. And if your expectation is he'll wave a magic wand and solve all your problems, that's also wrong. He can't. Why don't you see what else he says? He says Jan Bhagidari. Show me one leader in this world. I've written a lot on citizenship, and a lot of the things I do in government is citizen-centric governance. Citizen-centric governance is a distant cousin of Jan Bhagidari. Right? My first book, Either Citizen, all about citizen centricity. That is one level. No country in the world has done it completely. He talks of, remember, the state is the largest inflictor of violence on all of us. And the only thing that I can define good governance is the opportunity to remediate that violence. Constant remediation is what is good governance. Why is it violent? Because it exercises such enormous asymmetry of information on us. Half of us don't even know how government operates. Today I think I know something because I'm on the inside of the government. That is why it's got asymmetry of power. Here is the head of government who's coming and telling you, I want you to share that information and power, and let's do it together. It might signal out as Padma Shri nominations, but I know how deep we have gone into citizen-centric governance. So instead of I would only urge you, don't take my word for it also. Please don't take my word for it. Get enough data. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಗಾಡಿ ಅನ್ನ ಉಂತಾನ್ಸರವನು ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಗಾಡಿ ಅನ್ನ ಉಣ್ಣಕ್ಕಾಗದ ತಿನ್ನಕ್ಕಾಗದ ಇಷ್ಟು ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡೋದು ಹಾಗೆ. ಸೊ ಐ ವುಡ್ ಸಜೆಸ್ಟ್ allow evidence to dictate your decision making and your thinking. Don't allow emotions to cloud it. And today there's too much of emotional noise around and we all get carried away. So my only request is, we are the largest democracy. No nation in this world can say the number of elected representatives in different levels of government, we are the highest. Who made the 73rd, 74th amendment is not important. Whether it is 100% on the ground is not important. But the fact that we allowed it to survive for so long. There is no way any country could have done this at the level of scale that we operate. The kind of elections we ran, people can criticize and say 7 phases, Aur Ankula, E Ankula, Bislu, Gislu, Ella. But did we or did we not run the damn elections? Right? And it never went as per what the political parties thought. Both sides did not expect this result. Let's be frank. Right? It happened. So isn't that also a sign of democracy? So let's just talk with evidence. And countries that are talking of democracy, we don't even know when the debates are happening whether they're even aware that they're standing for president. Right? Exactly. That's the reality also. And we simply say they are the mother of democracy. So let's be absolutely open, honest, transparent, objective. Let's eliminate personalities from a discussion. Let's just look at paradigms. And I think we will definitely get there.
I think just one more question.
One more question.
Brief question, please. Or else we'll be
Arun,
unloaded from the stage.
Arun is an old friend, so he has to needle me a bit.
Preference.
That's a very enlightening
Thank you.
talk, and the book, I think, needs to be gone through in some depth. But in my personal life, one person I thought who changed the mindset towards the Indic, if you call it that, or civilizationally what is really ours, I truly feel was Gandhiji. Because at a time when, from Motilal Nehru on, everybody was westernized. He was one man who literally walked in a dhoti and not even a tops. I think he left a very deep impress on the way in which we could be. That we did not become was a different matter. But I want your take on, because you also were in that mode, or have been, I think even now in
Continue
that
to
mode.
be.
Continue to be. So how do you contrast that? Because I see it as a very powerful kind of message that he gave at a very important time.
I completely agree with you. In fact, I hold 2 people who shifted the narrative in India. First is Vivekananda, who proudly went around the world telling what he did, and then he brought in 2 important Vedantic values for us, Tyaga and Seva. none of them are original. Let's be open. Vivekananda didn't imagine it, right? It came from our Vedantic values. Gandhi also didn't imagine anything. He also borrowed, and he is also, both are open about it. They are not plagiarists in a non-disclosure way. Ahimsa and Satya was also Vedantic values. If you truly understand Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, everything is there. You don't have to go anywhere else. In the book, in the last chapter, I said, what is the legacy of Modi? I have actually tried to say, I would like you to read it, where I've tried to say the earthen groundedness and the shift that he borrows. I had drawn it from 3 different people that he draws inspiration from, apart from his public administration, etc. I bring in Gandhi, Patel, and Vajpayee. And I say, what is that he draws from each? And that ability to aggregate, take it together, and use what has to be used in the context of time, that is his leadership. And that is in context. The principles come from various sources. All of us, right? We all get some inspired along the way. It could be a grandfather, it could be an uncle, but we draw from somebody else. We are all never truly individualistic. We are all an aggregation of borrowed thinking. In a sense, whom you borrow it from is what different. I read Atma Bodha, I borrow something from that. I read Viveka Chudamani, I borrow. And not knowing Sanskrit, I will have to borrow from the commentator. Right? That's a reality, and we all live in that reality. So I think you're right, and I've actually explained it. And so my last chapter would be the most powerful chapter as a lesson for the world. If you truly want to make this world a better place, I'm not saying we need Modi. I'm saying we need the leadership that Modi is trying to exercise, that all of us could emulate, and bring out the leader in each one of us to make the world a better place. You could be a corporate CEO, you could be a country head, you could just be a citizen, or you could be a homemaker. It doesn't matter. But if we can bring those principles out, the world has to be a better place.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Balasubramaniam, for this very, very engaging discussion. And thank you all for being... Thank you. Thank you very much for being fabulous Sahridiyas in today's conversations. Dr. Balu is available for the rest of the day. Please be sure to share your Man Ki Baat with him.
And I see a lot of friends. You want to stay friends with me forever?